Welcome to Real News with J-Mac and Frog. I don't think people understand the gravity of what happened at the Munich Security Conference of 2025. Russia's invasion of Ukraine cast a long shadow over the proceedings. World leaders and diplomats gathered to discuss the pressing issues facing the international community. Among them was U.S. Vice President JD Vance, a figure known for his direct style and controversial views. Vance's speech at the conference sent shockwaves through the assembled dignitaries. He delivered a stark warning to European leaders. Vance argued that Europe faced a grave threat. However, this threat did not originate from external forces like Russia or China. Instead, Vance pointed to a more insidious danger: internal decay. He argued that Europe was losing sight of its core values, undermining its strength from within. Vance's speech marked a stark departure from the usual diplomatic platitudes. His words were a direct challenge to the European establishment. The vice president's speech sparked immediate debate and discussion. Some dismissed his views as radical and out of touch. Others found themselves agreeing with at least some of his points. One thing was certain: Vance's speech had shaken the foundations of the transatlantic relationship. Vance's central argument was as controversial as it was straightforward. He argued that the greatest threats to Europe were not external enemies like Russia or China. Instead, he pointed to a decline in the very values that underpinned Western democracy. He argued that this internal decay posed a greater threat than any external adversary. Vance pointed to several factors contributing to this decline. He criticized what he saw as a growing disconnect between European leaders and their citizens. He cited examples of governments overriding popular opinion on key issues. Vance argued that this disconnect was eroding public trust in democratic institutions. He also criticized Europe's handling of immigration, linking it to security concerns. Vance pointed to a recent attack in Munich by an Afghan asylum seeker as evidence of these failures. Furthermore, he criticized what he perceived as a suppression of free speech in Europe. He argued that attempts to stifle dissenting voices were counterproductive and undermined the very freedoms Europe claimed to defend. Vance's speech went beyond broad criticisms of European society. He also offered specific critiques of European governance and policies. He particularly targeted what he saw as the erosion of fundamental freedoms. Vance pointed to examples of governments suppressing free speech and disregarding religious freedoms. He argued that these actions were a betrayal of the values that underpinned Western democracy. Vance also criticized Europe's handling of the ongoing migrant crisis. He argued that mass migration was straining European societies and contributing to social unrest. He specifically linked uncontrolled immigration to security concerns, citing the recent attack in Munich. Vance's comments on migration were particularly controversial. They touched on a deeply sensitive issue in Europe, one that had fueled populist movements across the continent. Furthermore, Vance argued that European leaders were failing to stand up for their own interests on the world stage. He criticized their reliance on the United States for security and their perceived weakness in dealing with adversaries like Russia and China. Vance's speech unfolded against the backdrop of the ongoing Ukraine war. The conflict served as a constant reminder of the geopolitical tensions gripping the world. Vance used the war in Ukraine to illustrate his points about European security. He argued that the conflict exposed the dangers of relying too heavily on the United States for defense. Vance called for European nations to increase their military spending and take on a more active role in their own defense. He also criticized European leaders for not doing enough to deter Russian aggression before the invasion of Ukraine. Vance argued that their appeasement of Russia had only emboldened Putin. The war in Ukraine served as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in Europe. Vance's speech, with its focus on internal threats and European weakness, added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.